I adore tower defence games, but there's an awful lot of cookie cutter copy and paste that's out there, so you really have to sort through the wheat and chaff to get to the real gems of the genre. I'm delighted to say that Broken Universe Tower Defence is absolutely, in my personal opinion, in the top tier creme de la creme of all tower defence games I've ever played. I'm 25 hours in, I still haven't completed the campaign mode, I'm still discovering new and interesting things about it, but I wanted to take the time to do a proper review on how my experience has been so far for the first 25 hours, which still feels like a really good chunk of time to kind of go, do you know what, for £8, this is giving me life and love, buy it. In the basic maps on Broken Universe, you'll be dropping down into the map as a spaceship to try and rescue some resources or civilians, and you'll need to survive a set period of time without having your spaceship being destroyed by the waves of enemies that are coming towards you. You don't get to trigger these waves, they are time based on the timer that's going across the top of the screen, and you'll see the waves coming up on the bottom of the screen. You can't affect any of that whatsoever, so you need to plan effectively to make sure that you're dropping down towers at the right place and at the right time, and then investing in the upgrades as you go. You'll be mining gems constantly, but you'll also get gems that you can spend on new turrets and towers and upgrades by killing enemies too. So it's incentivized to try and kill things quickly, or maybe hoard things up to spend on some of the towers that you take into the battle with you. In Broken Universe, it's kind of a mixture of two different types of tower defence games. Usually you have tower defence games where you can only place towers around the edge of a map or a path because you can't interact with the path itself. Or you have tower defence games where the towers become the walls in the path to try and make it as long as possible. But Broken Universe kind of does a hybrid of the two because you can't quite place towers everywhere. There will be specific terrain that you can't use, for example. However, you can place towers in a way that means that the path is much longer, or you can take different routes around. And so there's a lot of tactics involved in that, particularly as a lot of the levels have a lot of destructible walls and environment. And later in the game, you gain access to objects that you can then bring in to build walls and barriers and specific things that will try and repel enemies back for a longer period of time and things like that. So it starts to add in more tactics the further that you play, and so the world building and the way how you force enemies around the map, particularly when you've got levels with multiple portals in, really becomes quite a key tactic in the game. Now, whilst your spaceship can be upgraded with missiles and weapons to defend itself, to try and get rid of some low-hanging fruit enemy-wise to some degree, and that's very helpful, the vast majority of damage that you'll be doing will be with your towers. Now, there's a huge range of towers, and they just keep unlocking. I'm still unlocking towers, 25 hours into the game, which is grand, and they all feel quite useful in their own unique way, and I would say only the Bloons TD series vaguely offers the same kind of mixture of strategies that you can take into a TD game and genuinely feel like it's a strategy that's worthwhile going for. And that's because towers have general attack damage, so attacking HP, but then you'll have shielded enemies and ones that have been buffed. And here comes the penetration stat, which not all towers have. And what this does is it kind of penetrates through the shield side of things and doesn't do necessarily HP damage, but the HP damage towers don't do very much damage to the shields, so you need a bit of a balance of the two. And as you upgrade towers, which can be done through some of the different currencies that are in the game that you earn as you clear levels, some towers start to lean more towards penetration, some lean towards HP damage, some of them then start to lean towards more status effects. So it'll be things like slowing down the enemy or making them confused so that they don't kind of go in the right direction. Or it could be that you null their attack, which can be very helpful for some of these sub-bosses that are coming around. It really does depend on how you load things out, and it depends on what's coming down the track for each level as well. And I did find myself throughout this game swapping in and out towers depending on what type of enemies were coming down the path, because some blatantly do better against some enemies than others, and so you have to constantly change your tactics. Towers initially start off with 3 levels of upgrade. So the one that you purchase at the beginning, level 1, and then a 2 and a 3 to be like their max version. However, later in the game, you start to get access to fusion towers, and this allows you to merge 2 towers together to become like ultimate versions of themselves. And these are incredibly powerful, but you have to spend quite a lot of your gem resource to be able to get there, because both of those towers need to be at max level 3 before they merge together. However, putting those in really key strategic places means that you can really do an awful lot of damage, and they come to the rescue quite often, so long as you manage to budget in the time to be able to kind of rack it up and put them in the right places. Also, quite often, because it's then stealing one tower and placing it on top of another, that might open up your defences that you then have to quickly plug before the next wave of enemies comes charging through a gap that you didn't really want exposed. Alongside all of your towers though, each world and planet that you visit has its own different environmental traps and hazards that you can enact too. Some of these are things like lasers that will point out in 2 or 4 directions that will be very helpful. There's army camps that will explode napalm fire. There's Uzi turret guns that will kind of kill things within various people's radiuses. But on the flip side, there's also environmental things that will spawn out enemies. And so it's not just things about where they come out from the portals, it's also where everything else is placed, because it might be snakes or snails or various animals coming from palm trees and things like that. It's really dependent on the different types of levels, and you'll have to bear those in mind, particularly when you're playing the game on the harder difficulties, because when you get into beyond the standard difficulty and you start playing in challenge mode, there's certain challenges that you can act, which is things like double the amount of hordes. And so suddenly something that was only 3 or 4 or 6 of a certain enemy might be really easy cannon fodder. But when you've got 2 back-to-back waves of those that are now 12, 14, 16 of them, they become overwhelming quite quickly, and again you need to change up your tactics. That mentioning of different environmental traps and hazards and different environmental enemies also plays into the fact that each planet that you visit throughout the 150 stage campaign also has its own special type of stage as well. So the first kind of 5 to 10 levels that you get in a planet will usually be traditional tower defense ones, where you just have to survive to the end of the time limit, and you'll get given a certain amount of XP and score depending on how much crystals you basically save beyond just surviving the level. However, you'll then get these kind of bonus extra stages, and these will have an additional missions that you need to complete alongside surviving the level, and these all have to be done within the time limit too. So it could be things like mining X amount of special gems before the time limit runs out, and often they're kind of aligned to where your defences will have a weakness, so that's annoying. Then you'll have things like turning on some scary technology that will then start firing missiles against your enemies and help you out. Or it could be things like where it flips over what the general goal and structure of a tower defence level looks and feels like. So there's a certain planet where actually all of the enemies are held inside various different boxes, and so you have to build your defences and then let all of the enemies loose. But there'll be 50 or 60 enemies in a box, and they'll all come at once. So it just changes the way how you prepare and set things up, and it adds much needed variety into a tower defence game. And there's about 10 different variants of these levels that crop up, alongside boss levels that take place in each world too. And each boss comes along with its own unique skill and unique problem that it causes, and it's usually around how it will damage either your own turrets, so it might be that it will throw an avalanche of rocks on it and stun your turret so that they can't move, or it could be that it's constantly got an earthquake or a laser beam or a shaker, and because a lot of the level is full of destructible walls, those walls will fall down. For example, there's a really cool one with a chicken that's got various different eggs that will hatch, and if you don't kill the eggs before they hatch, then loads of additional enemies come firing at you. So again, you might not necessarily have developed all of your strategies to capture and kill those eggs beforehand, but if you do so, that helps you out, but it then leaves you exposed to some of the other enemies coming down the portals that you normally have to defend from. And this is what I mean about Broken Universe just having so much going on, and I've not even got to the upgrade systems for anything yet. So pause for breath, we're going in. As you go through the different levels, and there's a normal, a hard, and then a wild level of difficulty, which then when you complete wild difficulty unlocks a challenge mode and like other specialist versions of the level. All of these give you XP, and when you level up you then gain P points, and these P points can then be used on your overall technologies and upgrade system. So there's attack, defense, build and support. And this works like an RPG skill tree upgrade. So it can upgrade all of your towers to have more attack, more penetration, more HP for defense. It can also do things like it will penetrate shields more than anything else. Or it could be that it starts to add some knockback to some of your towers. When you're playing with the build side of things, I don't know if you've noticed in the gameplay because I've not mentioned it here, but essentially you've got little robots that are flying around doing all of the stuff for you, but you're limited as to how many of those that you can use, and they also cost to produce more. So it could be that you lower the cost for just building towers in general, but it allows you to potentially have more of those robots flying around, but they'll also build and repair things quicker, which can be really helpful if you're taking a pummeling. Alongside all of that, there's also support attacks or defensive things that you can take into battle. You can have up to 3 per level, but there's loads to choose from. And these can be things like triggering a 5x5 like laser beam that will damage enemies in a very specific part of the map, or slow them down, or make them catch on fire, or like make them confused, or make them angry. Whatever it is that you're doing, you can choose 3 of these support attacks to bring into battle. But again, you can use your P points to play around with this too. So you can reduce down the cooldown speed, or the amount of electricity that it costs to spend to trigger some of these, like globally across the board. It could be that you want to increase the maximum limit of the amount of little helpers that you can have, or the speed of regeneration for some of the gems or electricity that you're trying to trigger all of this from. Spend all the P points on that. Don't forget that all of those support attacks are upgradable, just like all of your turrets and towers too. Alongside that, you can also purchase items that are then equipable to all of your towers. So these are things like they might reduce down some of the price to buy something, but it reduces down their range, for example. Or it could be that you're now going to cost 10 gems more, but they've got better range or quicker reload speed or something like that. So again, it's all around that tiny tweaking that just allows you to go so deep into this game that it just offers so much replayability, and you can spend loads of time in the menus mucking about and tweaking around your strategies, and take them out into the field and go absolutely nuts and feel like you've really made a difference by mucking about with all of the different settings of the towers as you play the game. Alongside all of this, there is also an object creation kind of element to this game too, for bringing in barriers and one-off weapons. And I've not really explored that too much, to be honest, because it looks like a real sink of your currency. So I'm desperately trying to not to, because I want to just keep upgrading everything in my towers, turrets and support attacks. However, in order to generate more currency, there is an endless mode, which gives you currency and rewards based on how far and long you survive. But there's also an exploration mode that smashes 3 levels together that you then have to survive all 3, and they'll be from different worlds, so they'll bring along different enemy types. So you can't like really pitch your towers to one specific type of enemy. You're going to have to balance it across the 3 different types, which is quite cool. And then there's operation mode, and this is tied to online because it kind of circles down different levels every few weeks. And the idea with this is that you've got this long list of like 50 odd levels, and you pick the level of difficulty you think you might be able to clear and then try and survive those, and they are ultra hard. So don't overestimate how far you think you can get because you'll get less rewards. However, they do pay out very handsomely, which you can then spend upgrading your spaceship with additional things, or your support weapons with more attack and cooldown and expenditure, or just simply upgrading your turrets and feeling good about yourself. I, as you can tell, am absolutely gushing and loving this game. It's one of the best tower defence games I've ever played, and I don't say that lightly because there's so many great ones, from the Bloons TD series to the Anomaly series, Defence Grid. This game is up there at that level of top tier, and I recommend anyone that loves tower defence games to give this one a go. I think you'll be really satisfied with it. Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/Higher Network. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.